So you might be wondering, what is an election? An election is consciously choosing a time for your goals in your life. But before we get into it, I just want to ask if you would subscribe and hit the notification bell. Whether you're an astrology noob or whether you have a lot of experience under your belt, just come along. If you don't subscribe now, you might never see me again. So make sure you do that so that way we can find out if using astrology can help you. Spoiler alert, it can. Why might you want to choose an election? I have a better question for you. Why wouldn't you want to choose an election? If you are familiar with astrology at all, you know that every event has a chart of its own. If you're here, I hope it's because you want to learn how to use astrology, not just passively consuming it anymore, but actually using it. And elections are one of the most easy ways to start using astrology today. There are lots of ways to use astrology. You can look at transits, you can look at return charts, you can look at aspects, you can look at ephemeris to find out exactly what's going on in any given day. And regardless of what's happening in your natal chart, you can still use an election chart to try and plan the best timing to start any goal that you might have. Now, astrology is regularly used by people who want to get the best kind of energy support for big major events in their life, like getting engaged, getting married, filing papers, or starting their businesses and launching things. We're going to talk today, later in the video, about why I chose to release this vlog today. So if you want to know more about that, make sure you stay till the end so that way we can go over the exciting election that I chose for today. You're going to be able to take the information that's in this video, find your own perfect time to enact your goals this spring, so make sure you stay tuned. First is establish what your goals are for the actual event and how you want that event to continue to play out in your life. This is not necessarily something that I can be like, step 1, step 2, step 3, but what I can do is give you what to look at so that way you can start doing this yourself. If you are planning your wedding, or if you're planning on buying a major purchase like a car or a house, contact a practiced, reputable astrologer to help you with this. This is for the people who are getting to that point where, you know what, I know enough about my chart now. I don't really want to Google it anymore. I want to start using it to make life better. I have been passively studying astrology for 12 years, and I have been seriously studying astrology for 3 or 4 years. But if you're doing something very big with your life and you want to use astrology, invest in an astrologer. You need to be responsible for whatever actions you take. You always have your own agency, and no matter what, your life is in your hands. Regardless of whether or not you decide to go pro, you might not be able to financially invest in an astrologer every time you want to make a decision in your life. It's not really possible to pick a perfect astrological election anyway, so don't get stressed out about that. But I don't want to pay an astrologer every single month, so that is what this video is to help you do. That's why it's a quick and dirty guide to astrology elections. Comment below if whatever questions are left over after this video, and if you are not new to astrology, maybe point somebody in the right direction. And if you notice I say anything wrong, make sure you let me know down below. I'm going to leave a link to a great resource down below that allows you to kind of get an idea of what planets and houses are going to help you accomplish whatever it is you're trying to accomplish for your election. You know that the planets stand for something specific. It's pretty well known. Venus is about love, harmony, relationships. This is your goal. This is the planet you should use, and try to put it in a house of this nature. Really think it's going to be helpful to see some elections in action, and you can even choose to use the same elections in your life to accomplish your goals. We're also going to talk about why I chose right now to release this video, so make sure you stick around to see what kind of cool energy is going on for today so that way you can use it too. Unfortunately, you cannot activate anything that is not already in the chart that precedes the election. Let me give you an example of this. If I was going to get married and I wanted to plan in things like spontaneity, being carefree into my marriage chart, but unfortunately, if my chart or the chart of my partner is much more oriented towards practicality, general rootedness, or security, that's not going to work. The two people that are participating in the elections event have to be compatible with the chart in order for it to be a good election. So unfortunately, you're not going to be able to change your life with an election. You're just going to be able to maximize what is already in your chart. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Generally, in a natal chart, the sun usually represents the individual. In the election chart, we actually put more importance on the moon instead of the sun. The sun will bring strength to that part of the chart. Of the moon is more representative of the outcome and the election as a whole. And so it's very important to check where the moon is, as well as the rising signs ruler. In case you're more accustomed to modern astrology, I'm going to have that on the cheat sheet as well, so that will be very easy for you to quickly see, is this planet in a good place, or is it in maybe a more challenged place? One more disclaimer. Of course, you're not going to be able to have a perfect election. You can't control all the planets. So if you want to have the sun in this place or Venus in that place, Pluto is going to be somewhere, Saturn is going to be somewhere, Mars is going to be somewhere. Unless you want to wait multiple years or even decades to have a planet move out of a sign, you're going to stuck with a certain time frame. The most important thing is to make sure that the moon is doing well in the chart. This means she's in a good house, in a good sign, and she's not being aspected, Saturn or Mars. That's something to be really wary of, and maybe you want to wait for the moon to go out of those aspects if possible. To make sure that the moon is not void of course. If possible, you're going to want the moon to be in its home sign of Cancer or in its exalted sign of Taurus. The most important thing though, if you cannot have that, is to try your best to avoid having the moon in Scorpio or in Capricorn. The moon is not supported in Scorpio and Capricorn, and it can make your election very frustrating. So if possible, avoid that. The next thing is to make sure that the moon is in a good house. The good houses typically for the moon is the 3rd house, where it finds its joy, especially if you are trying to do something with communication. The 5th house is always a good house, and the 9th house, as these make the trine with the ascendant. So those are good placements for the moon and or for the more positive planets, especially the ones that are impacting your actual event or objective. You also want to make sure that the ruler of the moon is in a good position. This would mean if it's in Gemini, the ruler of the moon would be Mercury, because Mercury rules Gemini. And the last thing about these rulers is to make sure that the chart ruler is also in a good position. You're starting to see now how it can be difficult to get a perfect election because you have a lot of things to be paying attention to. So let's talk then about what makes a not good position. Not good placement would be a square, an opposition, possibly a conjunction, depending on which planet it is, especially to any of the not good for elections planets, usually Mars and Saturn. If it is in its fall or in its detriment, those are also not good placements. And again, the cheat sheet will have more information about just confirming that those planets are as uplifted as possible. So objectively, for the majority of things that you're going to want to be doing, you're going to want Venus and Jupiter to be as positive as possible in the chart, prominently placed in the chart as possible. That means in the angular houses, like the 1st, 4th, 7th, or 10th house, on any sensitive points, like the ascendant or the MC. Of course, it has to make sense with your objective. Mostly, you're going to be wanting these things to be prominently placed. I have heard not to place the moon directly on the ascendant. Maybe the moon is something that you maybe want to make comfortable, but maybe not feature. Now, if it's more of a negative aspect of the chart, such as Mars or Saturn, you want to minimize those as much as possible. So that could mean putting them into like a cadent house, which would be 3, 6, 9, or 12th house. Those ones are a little less prominent, especially than the angular, but also than the succedent house, which succedent means future, cadent usually means past. Otherwise, you're going to really want to make sure Saturn and Mars are not impacting these planets as much as possible. And by these planets, I mean the ones that are most associated with whatever you're doing. If you're getting married, Venus, right? Gain wealth, then Jupiter. If it's for traveling, Jupiter and Mercury. The planets that are most associated with what you're trying to accomplish need to be lifted up. All right, let's go to my computer so that I can show you the elections that we are actually using for spring of 2022, and you can use them too. Okay, let's get into exactly what I have planned for the spring. Of course, I still have to put in discipline. I will hopefully receive the biggest bang for my buck, we'll say. Let's talk about my first example for the night. This is today's video. So I just want to point out a few things so that way you have an idea exactly kind of how to do this. So first, what you need to do is have your time frame. If you don't have a time frame picked out, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to find a possible election because you're going to just have so many opportunities. Most likely have a timeline for most of the things you're trying to accomplish. Just because it would be better for me to have Mars in my 6th house to start workout routine, I don't want to wait until he's there. That'll only happens once every 2 years. Whatever your timeline is, go to the ephemeris. Okay, I really want planets to be doing X. I really want this to be happening in this particular house. I already know I want the moon there. I already know that in order to accomplish this, maybe to have this specific chart ruler, I'm gonna do that. And when will the planets be there? And it will eventually only come up with just a few options for that time frame. And then you can check and see against your natal chart exactly which one is going to be most beneficial for you specifically. In this election, I placed moon in Cancer. When I placed it in Taurus, it was directly square Saturn, which we did not want possible. We want to avoid any squares to the moon. On this day is trine to the sun, Jupiter, and Neptune, and it is sextile to Uranus, which ideally there would be no there would be no connection to Uranus, but you know, you get what you get when Uranus is in a sign. He's there for 7 years, so you just gotta deal with it until 2026. So that is what we have as far as aspects. That put my choices for the sun, 9th or 10th house. If I wanted the moon to be in the first house, I could have the sun in the 9th house. But what that would have done is placed both of the malefics in the 8th house, because it is a succedent house, so it's not angular, but it's not cadent. So we wanted to get them out of the 8th house, and having Pluto there is maybe going to be difficult, but again, Pluto moves so slow. He's going to be somewhere in the chart. Other things about this chart that I thought were really exciting was I capitalized on the Sun, Mercury, Neptune, and Jupiter all in the 10th house of reputation and fame, because having the Sun here is obviously really nice. The Sun is at its highest point in this chart. It's very close to reaching the pinnacle of the sky. Speaking of, the MC is in the 9th house. Here we're talking about astrology, and the 9th house is an astrology oriented house. To be very honest, I want astrology to pay me, just like all the professionals who get paid for what they learn instead of what they create. If you don't want your art to be what makes or breaks your monthly budget, then learn something, become a professional, become an expert. And that's what I want astrology to do for me. But I like that it's there. I don't love that Saturn is right there. Saturn is in a cadent house, and if Saturn is going to be in the 9th house, giving me that long-term hard work ethic to accomplish my higher education, that's a positive thing. So that looks really nice. Also having Venus there. Venus is the most positive planet in my chart, so I really like having it in the house where I can learn. Of course, you guys are probably aware I live in a bus. I want to travel. I want to do long-term travel. I want to do long-distance travel. House being lit up is good. Saturn, Mars, what do you do? What do you do? I didn't want to wait. I don't want to wait. I want to get this started. I want to do this. I'm excited. And so that's why this is happening now, right? Back to the 10th house. Having Mercury in Pisces is not necessarily optimal. Mercury is not super happy in Pisces, but it depends what you want to do with it. If you want to use Mercury for communicating, it depends. If you want to be a poet, if you want to be a fiction author, if you want to be a songwriter, then it's not so bad. That's not so bad. And my career is associated with Pisces because I am a photographer, and Neptune, ruler of photography. So having the sun directly conjunct the ruler of photography is very good for a photographer. This is why I've chosen today to launch this. Just let that jog your mind and see what intentions can I set to use this beautiful energy. Jupiter's also there, expanding it, ideally expanding my reputation, ideally protecting my reputation. This is a date chart, so Jupiter is one of the most important planets. That is really good. I also, because I want to travel, I wanted Jupiter to be very prominent in the chart, and I got that. Now, another thing that we need to pay attention to is the chart ruler. The chart ruler of this chart is Mercury. Mercury, again, not necessarily super uplifted in Pisces, but accomplishing what I need him to accomplish there. So I'm happy with that. It's not a perfect chart, but I like it. Let's move on to the next chart. This one is actually already passed, but this happened on March 2nd. There was a beautiful new moon. You'll see the new moon there. This chart, the timing is irrelevant. I did not pick a specific time to go to the gym for the first time. This was weight training. I started weight training program on the 2nd of March because of the beautiful new moon conjoined with Jupiter. And I thought this was a really beautiful opportunity to start something new, and I didn't necessarily care too much about exactly what it was. I just wanted to integrate something that would hopefully be expanded in a positive way, and I really hope that weight training will provide that for me. The other really great thing was that Mars was still in Capricorn at that time. It was conjoined Pluto, so there could be some focus there, some intensity, and it is conjoined with Venus, who again is the most positive planet in my chart. She is actually in my 6th house. I like to use Venus for starting new health regimens in my life, and so that is something that I really liked for the 2nd of March. Other things, Saturn is conjoined here with Mercury. Mercury doesn't have anything to do with weight training, but it does give me a strong mind. Saturn is a planet of endurance, tenacity, and perseverance and progress. I really view Saturn as a progress-oriented planet, especially when it's in Aquarius. Progress is top of mind, and having Mercury there, since communicating is not really that relevant, it is great for building a strong mind and adopting this into my new regimen of what I'm doing for myself. The next one is running. So last year, I started running. Mars was conjoined with my Venus. It's really great because I was able to be competitive with myself. Wanted to have something that I was able to do when it gets warm out. I can just run. So let's take a look at that. Again, there's not a time with this. I did choose about 5:30 because I would like to shoot for that. It's okay if I don't do it at that time. The reason I would like for that to be the case is because Mars and Saturn are both in my 6th house. We just had a conversation about Mercury being near Saturn with the mental aspect, but since Mercury has moved away at this point into Aries, it is not necessarily impacting this, but it is impacting with Mars, which is the ruler of athletics. And so that is really good. Having it in the 6th house is really great. It would be trining my Gemini 6th house, which is a positive. That is really nice. So I would like to get started at 5:30 on that day. If I don't, I still truly believe that this is for me. I don't really think that it matters so much that I start at that time as I just start that day, because the sextile from Mars to the Sun and the proximity to Saturn in the 6th house, I actually like that. So this is an example of when you might place them with consciousness because they will help you in this situation. If I was going to get married, I wouldn't want to have Mars and Saturn be quite such a prominent aspect of the chart, but because I'm using it in a positive way for my health, having them in the health part of my chart, I think is really good. If I was going to be like, I'm going to go do drugs for the first time, this would be a terrible thing to do because these have really long lasting effects on my health, and so because I'm using it in a positive way, I think it's going to be good. The ruler of this chart is Mercury. Mercury is in Aries in this chart. Mercury in Aries is awesome, if you ask me. I have really struggled to accept my personal Mercury in Aries, but I love it overall because I love the passion, I love the drive, I love the dedication of the beginning. Of course, it's hard to keep going, but because this is all in my mind, I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. I already know that I can do this because I've done it before. The only reason that I stopped before was because I got injured, and then I had some limiting beliefs around being injured. I am past that, and so now I know I'm ready to go. The moon again is in Cancer. That is how I narrowed down to this date specifically. So the moon being in Cancer is really nice. It's in the 11th house, which is not super oriented towards my health, but it's not necessarily a bad place. The 11th house is traditionally a relatively positive place. Next one here is starting a yoga practice. I am using the term yoga very loosely. If I'm not looking to have this be something that I do daily or necessarily meditatively, I'm looking at this as more of an intention to focus on my body and movement, but not in a competitive way like running, and not in a building way like weight training, but more in a restorative, reflective way. If Venus is in Pisces, she's exalted, and if it's the 29th degree, it's called the anaretic degree. It's a very concentrated point in the chart, and having it in the 6th house to me is very beautiful because it's the house of health. Also have Mars here, not particularly strong in Pisces. Do think going to be very good for the restorative aspect that I'm looking for with this. Venus is looking just stunning. Chart ruler here, Venus, exalted, super strong, 29th degree. It is in the 6th house, which is not necessarily a prominent house, but still really matches what I'm trying to accomplish with it. So that I think looks really nice. The moon here is in Taurus, exalted in Taurus. Unfortunately, the moon is at a square to Saturn, but because Saturn is in the 5th house, which is a really positive house, I'm gonna let it slide. I'm gonna let it fly. If this does not play out, it's okay. I don't mind if this one doesn't work out. It's not a big deal. I can start over. It doesn't matter. I can choose a different time later. Maybe this wouldn't be the right time to input this into my practice, but I'm gonna try. That is my goal. What are you gonna do this spring? What are you going to do with the energy that's coming up? We have until April 29th until the planets start slowly going retrograde. The first one that's going to go retrograde is Saturn. And so if you don't have structures in place to accomplish these goals, starting with his retrograde, it's all going to start to unravel. So make sure when you're doing these elections that you start strategizing and making sure that they become permanent residents in your life. Do your best to get everything squared away, T's crossed, I's dotted. You're going to be in a much better place come retrograde season at the end of this year. You need it. You deserve it. You are going to do it. I'm so excited. Here we go. We're getting loosey-goosey. Re mi fa so. I'm not singing, but I feel like this is going to help still. Blech! Why am I actually talking about that? Oh my god, why am I so itchy? Okay, let's go back. Let's just fucking start over.